Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the People's Cabinet. I'm Dan Coe. I am formerly of the White House, and before that, Chief of Staff of the Department of Labor that oversees the agency that does the jobs numbers every month, the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And I want to start by talking about the recent announcement yesterday by Donald Trump of his new nominee. And before I get to his name and his background, I want to just review the playbook that I said was going to come after Dr. Erica McIntyre was fired. And I should say very briefly the history here. After Donald Trump didn't like the jobs numbers that come out every month, the Bureau of Labor Statistics comes out with jobs numbers that is a proxy for the health of the economy, whether jobs were added or subtracted to the economy. Last month, the numbers that were announced were lower than what people were expecting. Trump blamed Dr. Erica McIntyre, who was appointed by President Biden. Now, she was appointed on a 4-year term, just like her predecessor, who I worked with, who was a Republican. But that didn't matter to Trump because he didn't like the numbers and fired her and claimed that they were rigged or fabricated in some way. Now, this is all done based on statistical science. It's all done much like a poll. And she oversees a career staff of 2,000. About 40 of those people put together this report that has hundreds of thousands of inputs of data. She does not see that data and that report until 2 days before it is released, 1 day before the president. But that didn't matter to Trump. He just fired him anyway. So I said that this was going to be the playbook next. First, trash the BLS methodology. 2, nominate someone who says it needs, quote, updating. 3, funnel cash to outside help, enriching allies. 4, surprise, the numbers go up. And 5, compare apples to oranges and brag about record growth. So it didn't take very long. First, we saw Stephen Moore, an economist, come into the White House and basically stoke the flames of Trump that there was something wrong with the numbers. And then Trump yesterday announced this. I am pleased to announce that I am nominating highly respected economist Dr. EJ Antoni as the next commissioner of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Our economy is booming, and EJ will ensure that the numbers released are honest and accurate. I know EJ Antoni will do an incredible job in this new role. Congrats, EJ. And there's a picture of EJ and the president. Now, EJ Antoni is a chief economist at the Heritage Foundation. Now, the Heritage Foundation is a conservative think tank, and everyone was just freaking out and blaming EJ Antoni out the gate just for that. Of course, people are concerned. I should note, though, that Bill Beach, the person I referenced earlier, who was the commissioner of the BLS when I was there, was also from the Heritage Foundation. But he was an honest person who believed in the statistical science, and I never once doubted his data. And I should also note that the revisions that Trump was talking about that I mentioned earlier mean that when you put out the survey, as I mentioned, hundreds of thousands of data points come back, and they don't come back in time. So over the course of subsequent months and over the course of a year, because other information comes back, like from the state in terms of employer data, those numbers either get revised upward or downward. Okay? So Bill Beach would sometimes have revisions to the data. We never once questioned him. So the Heritage Foundation thing should not be something to dismiss EJ out the gate. But if you look at other economists and you peel back the onion a little more, it gets much more concerning, and you're realizing that the playbook is happening, especially step 2. Jason Furman, an Obama economist, said, I don't think I've ever publicly criticized any presidential nominee before, but EJ Antoni is completely unqualified to be BLS commissioner. He is an extreme partisan and does not have any relevant expertise. He would be a break from decades of nonpartisan technocrats. Now, taking a step back, why is this so concerning? Why is the jobs number so important? As I mentioned, the world sees the jobs numbers as an independent, nonpartisan proxy for the health of the economy. Therefore, the market makes trillions of dollars of investment decisions based on the jobs numbers. Now, at 8 a.m. every month, I was briefed with the Secretary of Labor on what the jobs numbers were. And as I mentioned, that is a proxy for the economy. Okay? And if they were under expectations, almost always, I knew that at 8:30 the markets would go down. And so having a BLS commissioner who runs an honest process is critical because the numbers are deciding trillions of dollars of investment. So that is why having somebody who believes in the science and what that economists respect as someone who will do that is so important. So yeah, sure, you could potentially put off a little bit what Jason is saying because he's a Democrat. I understand some people may say that, though he's a very respected economist. The Washington Post said some economists, including Stan Vuger, a senior fellow at the conservative American Enterprise Institute, described Antoni as unfit for the position. Quote, he's utterly unqualified and as partisan as it gets. A conservative think tank, okay? This is why you should be so concerned, because the partisanship of the numbers should never exist. As I mentioned, it's supposed to be a nonpartisan thing. The people who work at the Bureau of Labor Statistics are considered nonpartisan career employees, with the exception of the commissioner. They all run this process regardless of partisan influence. But if you put a partisan in there that a conservative is calling partisan, that's something that should concern all of us. So then people looked into EJ Antoni's Twitter profile to see what he has done in the past that could give an indication of the kind of commissioner that he will be and what his values are. So there's a Fox News chyron about Biden and jobs numbers. Of course, EJ Antoni retweeted a townhall.com tweet that said Joe Biden's economy was fake. Again, as I mentioned, these revisions happen all the time. They happen regardless of party. They're part of statistical science. There's nothing fake about the numbers. It's just the way it is. And the fact that our nominee for BLS commissioner doesn't believe that should concern all of us. Then another tweet. Trump warns 1 million federal workers might be fired in wild Doge cabinet meeting. 1 million is a very solid start. This was a tweet that was out there. EJ Antoni replied to that tweet, 2 more million to go. Okay, so 3 million federal workers. So basically he is advocating for all of the federal workforce to be laid off. As I mentioned, there are 2,000 people at the Bureau of Labor Statistics. 40 of those are intimately involved with putting together the survey. He basically just called for them to be fired. Can you imagine what it would be like to be one of those employees right now, knowing that this is your future boss, potentially? Here's the most concerning thing that I saw, and not to mention that those things shouldn't concern you as it is. EJ Antoni tweeted on August 4th. This was just a few days before it was announced. There are better ways to collect, process, and disseminate data. That is the task for the next BLS commissioner, and only consistent delivery of accurate data in a timely manner will rebuild the trust that has been lost over the last several years. So he's not just talking about the collection or the accuracy, but the process and the dissemination of the data. And so let me go back to the playbook. As I mentioned, the first step was to trash the methodology, which Stephen Moore did before EJ was announced. This nominee is doing exactly what number 2 is, right? Saying it needs updating, saying there needs to be a look at the process, etc. Here's what's happening next. You bet that he is going to say that in order to revise this process, we need to bring in outside help. We need to look at revising the system, and that costs money. This all comes back to money with this administration. And you bet that they're going to give contracts to people that are Trump allies that will enrich Trump either directly or indirectly. After they do all this, they're going to announce new numbers that are going to have the new methodology funded by these cronies, and Trump will celebrate the numbers going up. I have no idea what the markets will do with that data, knowing that it's potentially tainted. That's why it will throw this entire economy in chaos if people don't believe in the integrity of the data. That's why this is so serious. And what is so frustrating is that Trump is betting that most people aren't going to be paying attention or they'll be too confused by it, which is why it's so important that so many explain this and what is at stake. Trump will brag about record growth. He will scold people for not believing the numbers. He will trumpet this as some kind of economic success. And the information out there and the confusion will create so much chaos in the market. We saw this in Argentina and Turkey and other places where the numbers were perceived to be fudged. It threw their economy into chaos. And so I'll leave you with the best quote I've read so far on all of this. And I go back to Bill Beach, the Trump appointee from the Heritage Foundation, who I work closely with. This is also from the Washington Post. Bill Beach, who served as BLS commissioner during Trump's first term and denounced Trump's allegations that McIntyre, that's the former BLS commissioner who was fired, manipulated jobs data, said the next commissioner has, quote, a lot of work, unquote, to do to restore trust in the agency. We need a St. Peter, someone who is beyond a doubt a good person, unquote, Beach said. Bill Beach was a St. Peter. Erica McIntyre was a St. Peter. There were Republicans and Democrats, historically, all St. Peters. And I use St. Peter in the definition of people who believe deeply in the integrity of the process. Right now, that entire question of whether we can trust data coming from the government is at risk. We should all be incredibly concerned. And so what do? We need to hold our senators accountable. We need to educate our friends and family. Because once we lose the trust of the world, our economy becomes at risk. And all of the things that we care so much about, and all the things that we're trying to do every day to try to get by in this economy will be out the window. It'll be more expensive for us to buy things. It'll be harder for the world to trust anything our government does, even more so than it does now. So let's stay tuned. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the People's Cabinet. If you did, please like, subscribe, ring that bell, and put in the comments below who else you'd like to see sworn in. And stay tuned for new episodes every Tuesday. Let's go.